Merry Christmas, everyone. So I promised this video a while back, but in this video, I'm going to talk about how many characters are going to be on the Straw Hat crew by the end of the series. Now, in chapter 1, Luffy says that he wants about 10 men. I think in planning out how many characters that were going to be on the crew eventually, I want to say that the early plan most likely was at least 10 people. I think that number has increased based on how many characters that have entered the story and how many characters that seem to be important. And just to rip the band-aid off now, I think there will be at least 14 members on the main crew, not including Luffy. Because the theme of how crew members join is that you don't include Luffy. He's Mr. Zero in this situation. You start from Zoro and you work your way down. Now, on that topic, the funny thing about people joining Luffy is that sometimes the chapters will be named in their honor. Because, for example, Zoro joins in chapter 6, and the chapter is literally called Number 1 in honor of Zoro because he's the first person to join. Nami gets one. Hers is called the second person. Usopp gets one way later down the line with Frankie. Sanji gets one. And Brook gets one. And Brook was the last person to get one, and that chapter was called the 8th. The only characters who have not gotten one are Robin, Chopper, and Jinbei. So when you're talking about crew lineup, there are two different counts. The main one, like I just mentioned, is the one in which you don't count Luffy. But there is a count that I have seen in a color spread in which everybody, including Luffy, aren't counted collectively. So in this way, what I'm suggesting is that the two counts to pay attention to are 14 without Luffy and 15 including Luffy. The reason why these numbers are important, 14 and 15, is because they could be used to make the wordplay pun that has followed Luffy throughout the series. That being the wordplay pun of Go meaning 5 and Mu meaning 6, relating back to his devil fruit, at least the original name, the Gomu Gomu no Mi. And we have seen him sporting a 56 on a bunch of different clothing items and items that he has used throughout the series. So in this way, if you take 14, split it up, 4 plus 1 is 5. That is the Go in this situation. Then if you look at 15, meaning him included in the crew count, that means you have 1 and 5. 1 plus 5 is 6. That is the Mu. So the whole crew in this way would be a big word pun. Go with Luffy outside of the crew as the captain, meaning you have 14 members under Luffy. 1 plus 4 is 5. And then when he's included in the count, you have 15. That is the Mu, because 1 plus 5 is 6. So both the counts together make up the pun Go Mu, which is just, again, Luffy's original devil fruit name. With that being said, so keeping in mind that we have Luffy in the count for now, I think the breakdown is going to be pretty simple. I think you're going to have 5 characters on the crew per section of the world that we spend time in. There are 3 sections in total that matter, so that makes up for a total of 15 characters on the crew. So you have your East Blue section, which is your civilian sea. Then you have the Paradise section of the Grand Line. And then you have the New World section of the Grand Line, meaning you're going to have 5 crewmates per section. With that being said, in the East Blue, you have Luffy, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, and Sanji. They are the East Blue 5. Then when you get into Paradise, and I want to stop it here and say, in this video, we're going to be covering spoilers. starting from Wano all the way down into Elbaf. So you have been warned. Though I do think a lot of this isn't going to be spoiling big story points, but they may spoil things for some. So I'm just giving you a warning here. So when you're in paradise, the count, I believe, has already been decided. So you have Vivi, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, and Brooke. Yes, I do think Vivi is going to rejoin the crew, but we will go over that later. And then in the new world, I believe you're going to have 5 more characters, and I believe one of the 5 characters is going to perish to be replaced by another character that we have seen already. Now, starting from the top with the Paradise 5, the reason why I think Vivi is going to come back in the story and be a main crew member is because since she left back in the Alabasta arc, she has never become irrelevant. She has always been a big plot point, and it was recently revealed that the Nefertiti family are a part of the D-Clan. So that is another boon for her importance, which is why I think she will rejoin the crew at some time in the future. Now, with that being said, I do think she will be the vice captain, and we already made a big video about that, but I do think she will be the vice captain. No, Zoro is not the vice captain, nor is he the first mate. Those are canonical positions in the series that other characters have held. Zoro has never canonically been either one of them, as far as I know. He's been jokingly called the first mate by Bartolomeo in Dressrosa, but he's never actually been confirmed to be the first mate or the vice captain. Just putting that out there. So I will also be covering positions I think these new characters will play as we move on with the video. So she's the only odd one I need to cover in the Paradise 5. The rest are pretty self-explanatory, but now let's go into our New World 5. So, of course, we have Jinbei. And with him, we come to our first actual crew death. Yes, I think Jinbei will be the only Straw Hat to die. I go over this in a huge movie-like video on my channel, and I go over the reasons why. So I won't really go into detail here about why I think he will die, because there's, of course, a whole movie detailing why. But I will say I do think he will be replaced by Koala. His current position is helmsman, and I think Koala will take up that position, as she is literally dressed for the job. She looks like a chauffeur. And on top of that, what's so interesting about her is that she has a unique factor of, one, being the only human in the series adept enough at fishman karate to the point in which she can teach it to others. And we see this with Robin, as she actually teaches Robin how to use fishman karate. And she is the only human in the series with the mark of the sun on her back, rebranded by Fisher Tiger once she entered his care. So she stands out in that way. Now, when it comes down to the Revolutionary Army, there are a few things that are strange. One, why haven't we seen her back in the present? It seems kind of weird that she's amongst people she trusts, yet she's never revealed her back to them. And two, she doesn't have a official position in the Revolutionary Army of any importance. She is just described as an officer, which is pretty weird. And I've often said, and will probably say in future videos, if there ever was another organization to fall in One Piece, it would most likely be the Revolutionary Army. Now, with all that being said, let's move on to Yamato. Now, when it comes to Yamato, I think Yamato is going to be pretty unique because she is the only one that most likely will be a completely new character moving forward in these 5 from the New World, because unlike, say, Koala, there's no actual narrative makeup leading up to her existence or being an existing character in the narrative. Because with Koala, we were first introduced to her in the Jinbei flashback, and then we find out later that she is still an active character in the world as a part of the Revolutionary Army. Yamato didn't get any of this. We didn't even know that Kaido had a child. So she just appears in a similar way to how Brook just appears, because we knew that Laboon was associated with a pirate crew way back when, but we had no other information than that. And then in Thriller Bark, we find out that Brook was a part of that crew. So I think they are similar in that regard, which is very funny because both of them have the ability of cryokinesis. So that's interesting, but I digress. I think she will join too because, like Jinbei, she was given a very long cover story, which makes me think her importance is being highlighted even more so than Jinbei's, because Jinbei's only span throughout 28 chapters. Yamato is nearly double that amount, going for 44 chapters. So I said to say, if Oda is spending 44 chapters on her cover story and it ends off with her presumably going out to sea to meet Luffy, that means she has to be important and she has to join the crew moving forward. Now, as far as her position goes, I do think she is going to be the major log keeper of the crew, presumably responsible for making a big logbook compendium of all the crew's experiences out at sea, because that is what drove her to act like Odin following the adventures of his logbook, and she treated that logbook as her own Bible. So I think that has shaped her to want to make a logbook of her own, and possibly a logbook of everyone's adventures compiled together into one big story. That's what I think is going to be her position, actually charting down the adventure and getting the accounts of the adventures so far from the various members of the crew. Now, the interesting part about that is we don't really have that in the narrative, despite characters like Odin and Nolan making their own logbooks. The Straw Hats have never been too interested in that. There was this big actual product called One Piece Rainbow that was released that is a compilation of what the crew would possibly write in a logbook, but it's not really canon to the actual series. It's just a commercial product in the real world. So that's why I think Yamato will be the log keeper for the Straw Hat crew officially moving forward. Now, that brings us to some weird ones. Let's talk about Stussy. With that being said, I would really appreciate a gift from you if you are enjoying the video so far. Please click the like and subscribe buttons if you really like the video and want to see more from me, along with that bell. In addition, if you can find it, please click that hype button. It's very much appreciated. However, continuing, we have talked about Stussy a lot on this channel, and I think with all of her narrative accolades, she is possibly one of the most interesting characters in the narrative so far, so much so that I see her as a Robin 2.0, because not only do we see her in Whole Cake Island during the Tea Party as a high-ranking member within the underworld, she is also a former member of CP Aegis Zero. She is also the first human clone in modern One Piece history, and she is the user of the Bat fruit. And she is a clone of a former Rocks pirate. So if you ask me, her resume keeps stacking upon itself multiple times, and I don't think all that is being done for her to remain a minor character. On top of that, she completes a very interesting trifecta between herself, Sanji, and Frankie, because Frankie is the first cyborg in the series and introduces us to the concept. Sanji technically is the first mutant in the series and introduces us to the idea of humans being modified. And then Stussy is the first clone in modern One Piece history, making her the genesis point for a lot of further experience that we see further on in the series, like, say, Pacifistas or the clones of the Germa Kingdom, or even the Seraphim, as they are clones of various warlords. So she is the genesis point for a big part of the technology that we continue to see. That's why I think she is super important and most likely will join the crew in the future, seeing as how now she has cut all ties with her previous life by the end of Egghead, which means she is a free agent. So I think this makes her very important moving forward. So when it comes to Stussy's position, I do think she will be the lookout for the crew. And we made a big video about this a while back, and there should be a link around here. But the idea is that with her being the user of the Zoan type devil fruit known as the Bat Bat fruit, she would be the only person on the crew with a actual flight power. Because of course bats can fly. And in having that actual flight power and being a vampire bat, because the fruit doesn't specify her being a vampire bat, but seeing as how she sucks blood and does a whole bunch of other stuff, it's very likely that she is a vampire bat. But on top of that, she actually has vision powers, and we see this in the anime. She is capable of infrared vision, making her the only person on the crew with actual vision-based powers. But in addition, with her being a nocturnal creature and presumably being a vampire bat, she would have a different sleep schedule from everybody else, which means she would probably be able to stay up for long periods of time. And yes, sleep schedules have been outlined in detail before within an SBS, so we know they are a canon part of the narrative. So she is equipped to be the lookout, in my opinion, based off of those facts. With that being said, what's also quite interesting about her is that she does something that you don't really see happen a lot. And this is why I compare her to Robin, because much like Robin's bounty poster appearing in Frankie's flashback, Stussy herself appears in the joint flashback between Kuma and Bonnie. And that takes us to the next person who I think is going to join the crew, that being Jury Bonnie. I think Bonnie is going to be the apprentice on the crew because so far, especially with the abilities of the age fruit that have been shown off in the anime recently, she is very much linked to the crew through her father Bartholomew Kuma, because it was Kuma that separated the Straw Hats back in the pre-time skip, which led to the time skip popping off. So the Straw Hats owe their survival to her father Bartholomew Kuma, so it would only make sense for them to return the favor and look after her for the remainder of the narrative. Also, with Luffy being Nika, and that being the deity of her father, and in turn her deity, it would only make sense for her to be by somebody that she originally sought out to find, along with her father Bartholomew Kuma. So it only makes sense for her to be on the crew moving forward. What's also quite interesting about this is that she turns into Nika as well, being inspired by Luffy. It's also quite curious that her journey starts off in a very similar way to Luffy, punching out a monster of sorts with a stretchy fist, as Luffy defeats the Lord of the Coast with a Gum Gum pistol, and Bonnie defeats Alpha, a member of CP8, with a Nika-like punch. So you have Bonnie imitating Luffy, like an apprentice would imitate a master. With that being said, too, it was revealed in SBS 113 that the reason why Bonnie feels comfortable revealing her true self now in being a 12-year-old girl is because she's comfortable around the various Straw Hats. The funny little Easter egg in this quote by Oda is that she feels comfortable on the Sunny and Elbaf. However, in the narrative as of this recording, she has never been on the Sunny. So that in itself is very curious, and I think is a hint to her joining the crew in the future. Now, let's move on to the final character, Loki. So this is being recorded shortly after the release of chapter 1169. So as of this recording, he has already been invited on the crew by Luffy. This is significant because all the people in Loki's life who accepted him are gone now. We know King Harold, his father, has passed away, and we know his adoptive mother, Ida, has passed away. And now Hadrudin, his older brother, still hates him. His country hates him. So with Luffy giving him shackleless acceptance, I think that is something very significant that needs to be studied because it has very familiar trappings of Luffy asking people to join him in the past, and they denied it the first go around, but eventually come to like Luffy and join the crew anyway. It feels a little like, say, Frankie or Jinbei, to be fair. So I do think he's going to join the crew in the future because finding somebody who accepts him for him is a very significant turning point in the narrative for him. Now, the question is, how does a giant the size of Oars fit on a ship like the Sunny? Well, I've made a few videos talking about how I think Loki has eaten some sort of shrinking fruit, and that is the legendary fruit of Elbaf. Now, the funny thing about this is that we have had size altering abilities in the series before, mostly all held by giants. We've had canon examples and non-canon examples. So, of course, the canon example is Saiwan Wolf of the Blackbeard Pirates, who has eaten a huge fruit. So, theoretically, he would be the opposite of Loki in this way. But in non-canon material, it becomes very interesting because the same fruit has jumped from medium to medium. In One Piece Round the Land, we have a character named Blue, who was on the Giant Warrior Pirates captained by Brocky and Dory, and he had the mini fruit, which allowed him to shrink. Then, in a filler arc associated with One Piece Film Z, we have Lily in Stomach, who also has the same ability. So, Blue has died after the events of the video game, and now Lily in the anime has his fruit. So they both have the same fruit. Quite oddly, much like Blue, Lily in Stomach has a relationship to Brocky and Dory because her father, Pans Fry, a giant cook, grew up with Brocky and Dory. So, in this setup, both characters are from Elbaf, and both characters technically are associated with Brocky and Dory. I think this trickles back into the canon because Harold, the father of Loki, was also childhood friends with Brocky and Dory. So that's why I think this is going to come to a head, and we're going to find out that the legendary fruit of Elbaf is actually a shrinking fruit that Loki has eaten. And I think, unlike the non-canon mini fruit, this shrinking fruit most likely will give Loki some sort of boost based on how much mass has been shrunken. And I think this will work on himself as well as objects. So that means Ragnar, his giant hammer, which as of chapter 1169 is most likely a Zoan fruit user of some sort, will be boosted by Loki's abilities, which is why I think the hammer and the devil fruit are supposed to work in tandem because the devil fruit boosts the power of both the user and the hammer. With that being said, too, Loki, much like Stussy, is a biological curiosity because Stussy was the first human clone in modern One Piece history. However, Loki might be the first true giant to appear in centuries because no other giant in history, as far as we know, has the same eyes as Loki. He has horns and weird snake eyes. No other giant looks like that, which is why he might be the purest of pure when it comes to giants, making him a very interesting character to have in the narrative and why his placement in the series is supposedly so important. So that's why I think he will join the crew as well. Now, when it comes to his position on the crew, we don't have a lot of information about his character yet to make a strong judgment call, but based on what we have seen, and seeing as how he did lead a band of animals to attack the villages of Elbaf, I could see a leadership position of some sort in his future. And seeing as how he is the younger brother of Haruden, who is the captain of the New Giant Warrior Pirates associated with the Straw Hat Grand Fleet, I could see Loki being some sort of staff manager in the future, organizing the Straw Hat Grand Fleet under Luffy's orders. So he would be managing the fleet for Luffy, which I think is something possible, seeing as how Luffy doesn't seem super interested in the fleet as a whole. So maybe that could be his job. That's all I really have, but I'm sure more will come to light as we learn more about Loki as the series goes on and a firm judgment call can be made. However, with that being said, those are all the characters that I think that are going to be on the main crew. So, in closing, you have 2 counts for the Straw Hats that are canonical. 1 including Luffy, 1 excluding Luffy. All together, if everything shakes out, that gives us 15 with Luffy, 14 without Luffy. 1 plus 5 in 15 is 6. And then 1 and 4 in 14 gives us 5. So 1 plus 5 is 6, 1 plus 4 is 5, giving us the Japanese word pun of 5 and 6 that relate back to Gomu, which is the original devil fruit name of Luffy's ability, the Gomu Gomu no Mi. Then in terms of character deaths, we have Jinbei dying, who then will be replaced by Koala, which with Vivi's return, that gives us Vivi, Koala, Bonnie, Yamato, Stussy, and Loki, making for a full crew of 14 people under Luffy. With that being said, give me your thoughts and tell your friends about Polypede Wetsuit. Also, Merry Christmas!